no secret. It's plain to see.
Hi everyone, I'm hoping that you can hear me, and I'm just going to send it, see if I can. It's only my second talk on Fireside. I also have, along with my life partner, Bryden Firm. You can find that at bridenfirm.com, and I have a Fireside chat on here for Bryden Firm, which is our homesteading firm in Bear River, Nova Scotia, Canada. And we do that live on Thursday at 9 p.m. Atlantic, 8 Eastern. And we welcome you to join us on that as well. So this is actually only my second time doing a talk on Fireside. And I'm still learning the system. So just to make it life a little more interesting, I'm actually going to send out join me live now on Fireside for help growing your family tree. And just posting that to some of my social networks in hopes that maybe some people may show up. It is a bit unnerving doing this on your own for the first couple of times because, first of all, you have no idea if anybody's going to show up, or how to use the system. But I just thought maybe I would jump on here and, if for nothing, no other reason, give myself some practice. Because I once heard it said that anything worth doing is worth doing wrong until you can do it right. And trust me, especially in my early days of doing family history and genealogy and researching my own ancestry, I definitely did make some mistakes. I'd like to think that over the last 30 years, I have been able to improve in my research, and I have been able to learn many things and even be able to help some people with their research. And so I thought maybe I would try doing that on here, even though it's not directly related to her Bryden Farm Fireside chats that we do on here Thursday night at 9 Atlantic, and that'd be 8 Eastern. Since I'm one of the two entities that run Bryden Farm, our homesteading farm here in Bear River, Nova Scotia, and my hobby has been genealogy, ancestry, and family history over the last 30 plus years. I thought that perhaps it might be a good idea for me to do a talk on here. And I'm hoping that maybe someone out there might even join the talk and step up and ask some questions. Of course, when we're doing genealogy, we always try to, there we go, turn on my video. That might have been a better way to start learning, as I say. Hi, Roscoe. There's my boy. And Roscoe keeps me company, never too far away. He and our other dog, Holly. So I entitled this Growing Your Family Tree. One reason is I have over on Amazon, and actually I didn't think it'd been that long ago, but over on Amazon, I have a book, actually a couple of books, self-published, and one of those is Growing Your Family Tree. And if I just go over to, this is Amazon.ca, because I am up here in Canada, and if I just type in Growing Your Family Tree, there's a number of things that do come up. You're looking for the one that says Growing Your Family Tree, Sorting the Wheat from the Chaff by Brian Hurlbert and Diane Parent. Actually, Diane helped me by writing a foreword. She has a Bachelor of Education, was a teacher for many years, and my spelling and grammar is not always great, so it was nice to have her to help me with the book, and not only help me with the book, but also to help me do research over the years. I'm a cousin to her husband, and Diane and I have become great friends and let's say research partners. And she and I have spent many hours doing family history and genealogy research. I'm thinking that I may see if I can read a little bit from the book. Because it's funny how things happen in our lives. I'm very thankful that Diane and her husband come into my life and was able to meet them, even though they live half a country away out in the western provinces of Canada. I'm here in Nova Scotia in Atlantic Canada. Get my tongue untied. My book, Growing Your Family Tree, Sorting the Wheat from the Chaff, was dedicated to a good friend of mine who's since passed, a distant relative, but more so a kindred spirit, one who I spent many hours researching with. And the dedication on my book, Growing Your Family Tree, Sorting the Wheat from the Chaff, is dedicated to Lucy Glover Mullen. I was reading this before I started the chat. It's always difficult to read what you've written because your mind wants to jump ahead, but I'm going to do my best to read this dedication. There are lots of people to whom this book could be dedicated, and there definitely are. Many of you know who you are, and I'll always be thankful for all of you. There is one, however, who may never know that this book is dedicated to her, my dear friend, Lucy Glover Mullen. Pausing for a minute, I think in some ways, perhaps, she may know. Lucy and I spent many hours on the phone and in person poring over information related to our respective families. Families who intermingled long before either of us were ever known or thought of. families without whom we would never exist. Families and ancestors who have led to us being who we are, at least by DNA. And I often think in other respects too. Lucy believed that everyone counted. Lucy had no unknowns in her tree. Many of us include unknown as a family name when we don't know their surname. More often than not, these unknown surnames belong to wives of our male ancestors. Lucy believed everyone counted, that everyone was important, and that is why Lucy did not use unknown for unknown surnames. In her family tree, everyone was a somebody. Lucy made me and everyone she met feel like a somebody. Dedicated to my friend, Lucy Elizabeth Glover Mullen, who was born the 2nd of February 1954 and died the 28th of August 2015. Doesn't seem possible, it's been that many years. She helped me in more ways than she will probably ever know. It's been a wonderful 30-year journey, or 30 plus years of doing family history and genealogy. And I have absolutely loved it. I also have a website, growingyourfamilytree.com, which I invite you to visit. And on these talks, I try to answer questions from anyone who shows up and seeks information, to sometimes connect with family members, sometimes get started doing your own family history, or genealogy, or ancestry, or perhaps help with research and tearing down that brick wall. That's how we refer to situations that we're unable to find information for, like finding a great-grandparent or someone part of our family tree that we're just stuck on, seeming like a brick wall. They join me sending out another Facebook post for growing your family tree fireside chat. Let's see if anybody shows up. This was totally impromptu and therefore not advertised. And so if somebody shows up, it'll be great. And if not, then that's okay too. But it would be nice to see, to have somebody to talk to, to have somebody to research for. So let me tell you a little bit about my story, because we all have one. It may not have started with us, but it does at this point. It does start with us, our story. It may have been someone else's story when it started. And I guess that is the difference between growing our family tree, or your family tree, and doing an ancestry or genealogy or descendant report, because they're all different. One, of course, is your family tree, which starts with you and goes back to your parents and grandparents. And publicly, what we try to do is avoid using names, dates, and places in a public discussion for those people who are still living. So, having said that, if you are listening, if you want to ask questions, you're more than welcome. But we'll try to do it in a way that doesn't reveal any private details of any living person. And so when I look back at my grandparents, who, by the way, were all born 109 years or more ago, and so have all since passed away. I see names like Hurlbert, Kavanaugh, Murphy, and Burrell. And I give that Murphy a little look because I suspect that one, my birth mother didn't know who her father was. However, through DNA and cousin matches and speaking to those family members and recalling the stories, that the few stories that were handed down to my birth mother about her father or his family, seems to tie in very closely to the Murphys. More closely to, as grandparents or probably great-grandparents, John Richard Newcomb and Mary Catherine Edwards, who were born in 1855 and 1864, and who lived in Nova Scotia, in or near Murphy's Cove on the eastern shore, for I have many cousin matches that are among their descendants. And the reason that I picked Roddy Murphy as my grandfather was at first I was looking at his uncle, the son of John Richard Newcomb and Mary Catherine Edwards, a son Arthur who never married. And therefore, if I claimed him as my grandfather, I would not have any of his family members complaining. And in many ways, it's the same reason that I later claimed Roderick Murphy as the most probable one as my grandfather. But as I began to look closer at that, you can, their DNA, not fully tell, but you can come within a generation. And John Richard Newcomb and Mary Catherine Edwards had 4 sons, 3 of whom were wed, and their son Arthur was not. And a handful of grandsons, one of which, Rod Murphy, was not married, and therefore I've chosen him. But it's also based on the fact that he was within walking distance to where my maternal bloodline grandmother was at the time. So, by convenience, by DNA, by cousin matches, and later by photo association, seeing pictures of Rod Murphy and his father, Irvin Murphy, it is almost certain to me that he would be my grandfather. One of the things that you want to be aware of if you are doing your family history and growing your family tree is that you may be prepared, I guess is the best way to say it, be prepared to uncover things that you may not want to uncover. But as long as you know them to be true, or can prove or perhaps disprove them to be true, embrace them as great discoveries about you. I'm going to read a little bit more from my book, Growing Your Family Tree, Sorting the Wheat from the Chaff. And it's from the foreword. And this foreword is written by Diane Perrin, B.Ed., Bachelor of Education. After a rewarding career and retiring 20 years ago, I began to formulate a retirement plan that had to include keeping an active, open mind and doing something for others. I had seen the following meaningful verse. Great people talk about ideas. Average people talk about things. Small people talk about other people. And then sadly, there are people who love to talk about themselves. I decided to keep my mind active by leaving a legacy for my children and grandchildren. So began growing my family tree, and also my husband's, in order to find and preserve the family roots. I began with the following philosophy in mind. Before you assume, learn the facts. Before you judge, understand why. Before you hurt someone, feel. Before you speak, think. Growing a family tree involves all of the above. Searching for facts was more difficult 20 years ago, and a resource book would have been most welcome. My search led me to meeting Brian, first online and then telephone and finally in person. Our meant to be meeting has given us many years of working together. I was able to recognize his talent for helping others, his well-developed marketing skills, and his keen learning and organization skills. I had seen a quote by Ben Carlson: happiness doesn't result from what we get, but from what we give. Knowing Brian had much to give to help others search for their roots, I encouraged him to write this book for the benefit of others. Brian has sorted the wheat from the chaff in this most informative book on growing your family tree. Beginning and seasoned genealogists alike will find it an essential, informative read. Many thanks, Brian. May you gain happiness from what you have given us. By Diane Perrin, B.E.D. And certainly it has given me many hours of enjoyment. The time spent with others, helping them to find the names and sometimes connect with their parents, grandparents, maybe earlier generations. These things have been very rewarding, and I so appreciate all the people who have come and been part of my journey. Looking back to my grandparents' generation, the names that I mentioned: Hurlbert, my last name, Kavanaugh, Murphy, and Burrell. Two of those names, Kavanaugh and Burrell, coming from the Irish. My grandmother being a Kavanaugh, and her grandfather, Simon or Samuel Kavanaugh, who lived from 1790 or thereabouts till 1870 and died in Yarmouth County, Nova Scotia. We believe that Simon come from the Wexford area of Ireland. Unfortunately, we know little of his ancestry. And so there are times that we are, for whatever reason, unable, at least for the time being, to get past those brick walls or roadblocks in our research. And we all have them. Looking at my Burrell ancestry, my grandmother's grandfather, George Howard Burrell, born 1861 in Yarmouth County, Nova Scotia, was, I believe, the first of his siblings to be born in Canada, for they left Ireland at a very difficult time at the end of, or towards the end of, the Great Potato Famine, which was a time when many of the Irish families had to leave their Emerald Isle. And though it's been 4 to 5 generations, my other book on Amazon is From Irish Roots, and it looks at a more lighthearted approach, we'll say, to not just my family, not just my ancestry, but also the recipes, the folklore, and some of the stories that have grown up around the Irish people and those ancestry and ancestors and those of us who have Irish ancestry. Reading a bit from Irish roots, potatoes, recipes, folklore, family, and more. If you're looking for a textbook and not just a book with text, that is easy. Just go to your local library or university, and they'll do their best to dispel all of the most charming stories about Ireland in the book From Irish Roots. I want you to imagine what you would eat if there were no potatoes. I want you to imagine what the world would be like with no leprechauns. It would be half as exciting, and much of Ireland's charm would wither away. We just can't let that happen. Now, while our book here may not be a textbook and not everything well documented, we want you to know that while we may be blessed with the blarney, we also may include helpful and entertaining information about potatoes, recipes, folklore, family, and more. And that's a good little description from within the covers of my book, From Irish Roots. So it seems like it's a quiet day on here today. And I noticed it was also a quiet day over on Wisdom, which is where I usually like to hang out. Part of the Wisdom community using the Wisdom app, where you can find us at wisdom.app/Bryden Farm and learn more about our homesteading farm, our regenerative farming practices, rotational pastures, our cats, our dogs, our goats, pigs, rabbits, chickens, Muscovy ducks, gardens, and other such things. So, I believe for now, I'm just going to leave this chat and hope that perhaps you will find it in some ways rewarding, worthwhile to be watched, and perhaps join me for another fireside chat, because I'd like to help with growing your family tree.